I'm so glad y'all are here. Thanks for being here to talk about how we can be advocates for women in the workforce. Let's just introduce ourselves so everybody knows who we are. I'm going to start with Mel, if you'll introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody, and hello, Charlie. Thanks for having me today. My name is Mel Butcher. I go online a lot of times by Mel the Engineer, and I work in consulting for Carollo Engineers, and I host the Empowering Women podcast, which is a production by the Empowering Women in Industry organization.
Awesome. HJ, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Charlie. I'm HJ Dewis. I'm with ABB. I lead our marketing efforts, and I've been a longtime fan of Charlie's organization. We've been connected for quite some time, and I'm really looking forward to participating in this network opportunity. Thanks.
Awesome. All right, David.
Hi, my name is David McMillan, and I work for GRUNDFOS, the global pump company. And I'm based here in the US, but as you can probably tell by my accent, this is not my birth country. But I've been here for almost 6 years and been in our industry for pretty much my entire career. Great to be here.
Well, they all have some background in my industry, which is empowering pumps and equipment. So the equipment side of things, you're either taking care of them, figuring out how to design them and make things better. And then the other thing I wanted to say is each of these people have touched my life in some way. And I wanted to bring them in to get their perspectives on how we can be advocates for other women, because they have, really inspired me. So I'll start with HJ because he's kind of probably my most direct person that I've met in business and known you probably the longest too, HJ. And really just I'll say how you advocated for, women in the industry of what I've seen and witnessed. It's looking for opportunities to have a conversation. I know that we have had several conversations over the years where I'm just want to know the next step. What would be a really good thing for, say, bringing a young professional in? And I know you've worked with different associations and things where you are advocate and also bringing people into that space. But from your perspective, how do you think that you're an advocate for women in our industry?
Thanks, Charlie. I would say there's a couple of ways. You mentioned the associations, right? I think that there are a lot of associations that are doing women groups, conference groups. And I think it's really important to introduce people, regardless of where they are in their career, whether they're new to the industry, or even if they're, senior in the industry or have quite a bit of time, to introduce them to those groups. So as example, your group here, NAED has Empowering Women in Industries. In ABB, we have a group, Encompass Women. I think that's a really good venue to get people involved, and I think it gives a very comfortable and welcoming environment for women who maybe really don't have necessarily that confidence to go to men's organizations to really get started. It gives them the opportunity to learn from women who are senior people, very successful, who navigated the waters. Mm-hmm. And then I would say the other thing is, hiring practices. When you're really looking to hire, if you really respect diversity as a whole, as an organization, probably none of us want to hire people that are like us, right? Our opinion and our perspectives are already there. So we really need to look at hiring opportunities through hiring to encourage women growth and to expand their career, right? Take on opportunities that they may not have taken on. So whether it's encouraging people for roles that they may pursue, or when we're hiring ourselves, really to push the diversity window with our candidate pool.
Yeah, and you said something that made me think about Mel and her background of teaching a young professional, what do they need to look for in a career? I know you've got a lot of inspiration there, Mel, of how can you help someone in their careers. Do you want to talk about that, of kind of what you've seen as far as, I know that's the way you're an advocate for women. I know the title of this is how men can be advocates, but I think we can learn from each other. Mel, how would you say that you're an advocate for women?
It's probably difficult to be objective sometimes on something like that, but I produce the Empowering Women podcast with several things in mind that are to advocate for women. So there's sort of the highlighting aspect of putting the spotlight on a woman in an industry who might not otherwise get the spotlight that she deserves for her hard work and all that she's achieved in her career. So there's that aspect of it. And then there's also the creating something that can be accessed for free by anyone and listened to, that has advice in it, advice for other women who are looking to climb whatever ladder in the industry that they're in. And hopefully it provides guidance and inspiration for them. And I also see it as a resource for men who want to educate themselves and understand what women have had to go through to make their way up in an industry. So I think there's several different ways that hosting a podcast like that provides a really excellent resource. And then there's some things that I do on the side that, you know, I can't really showcase, but I get contacted a lot by young engineers, particularly women, looking for advice on how to network, how to find a job, how to handle sticky situations in their workplace. And so as much as I have time to accommodate those questions, I do interact with a lot of folks, you know, and I feel like that's a responsibility I have, since I am visible via something like the podcast, to, you know, help out when people reach out in that capacity. So I hope that answers.
It does. And she does. I know this because, you know, we have several groups where we're together, and it does take that extra effort to be available. So that's one of the things. And David, you know, when I met you, I was on a kind of mission over at GRUNDFOS booth, and I was talking to their marketing department, and we were talking about water and the importance of that, and advocacy groups, and I talked about empowering women and how we would love for them to be a part of it. And I saw just this light come, you know, on her face, and it was Ashley. And she says, you know, how passionate she is about, you know, making sure people have water, and that a lot of it falls on women and children to carry that role. And so she says, and I think you should really talk to David, and you happen to be there. So you came over and joined the conversation. But what I left there was he is so passionate about empowering women. Like, how did this happen? How is he so, you know, how did this happen? You know, and I'm thankful that you joined us, because I want everybody to hear that and hear what you're doing, as far as, you know, knowing that you have a daughter that you want to, you know, have all the opportunities, and then at the same time how that plays into your work. So David, I'm going to let you share that story, since you did it so well the first time.
I do remember it. I'll give it a best shot, but I think one of the things that I've developed in my career and also my life is I've had two daughters. So prior to, one is 10 and one is 5, and prior to that, I probably didn't give diversity, not just in terms of gender, but other types of diversity, any real consideration. So when those awesome girls came along, it also coincided with me going around the world for GRUNDFOS. So living in the Middle East and seeing what diversity means there. But I spent almost two very informative years in India. And I was, you know, India is a very different country to where I'm from in the UK, and certainly very different from the US. And I started to realize that we as men have to start to empower girls from a very young age, but also women in industry as well, to not only we advocate for them, but we make them be able to advocate for themselves as well. So the example we spoke about is, who knew that a pump installed in a village in India could actually empower women to actually add to society? So the example would be a little submersible pump in a farming town in India. Prior to that, girls would walk for water. They'd walk 3 miles, 4 miles. So basically what that meant is girls didn't go to school, because they were the younger girls, and they prioritized boys to go to school, and girls would go and walk for water. So then all of a sudden, GRUNDFOS or other companies, I'm not just going to mention our companies, a pump would be installed in that village. there was no need for a girl to go and walk 2 miles, 3 kilometers for water. And all of a sudden that girl can go to school now. And they put tugged on my heartstrings to think, how would I ever feel if that was my daughter? If you put yourself in that situation, we're talking about life and death, water, and we're talking about kids' education. Why are those two things linked? And that was some of the things that got me thinking as I was maturing as an adult, to think this thing can't continue. So I don't know if that was the example you were hoping, but that kind of started me on my journey to really understand how things connect and how those things can actually improve people's lives, not just females, by the way. I'm talking about everyone in society as well. So that was kind of.
Oh, are you kidding? I love a good pump story. A pump story that gives me all the good feels.
Yes, we love pumps.
Yes,
Yes.
But to the point, I've actually had some people over in Uganda that I would sponsor because they didn't have clean water. They would have water, but it wasn't clean, and so they would still get sick. And it just that when I think about children and my passion for children and taking care of them, that feeds into that, right? So starting at a young age. I wonder though, is there an example, like was there a man that, for you, David, it sounded like really that experience of seeing that and seeing the children kind of working, but is there a kind of a man that was leading you to see this in any way? Somebody that you can point?
Yes, he was my boss in India. His name was Ranganath Krishna. He was the president of GRUNDFOS India. And he just walked the talk of everything is all about equality, whether it be gender, whether it be climate change, because actually climate change happens to affect the poorest of people, doesn't really affect the more wealthy. So he was all about education, start young, equality for girls and boys. Obviously, in India, it's not necessarily about a racial divide. Maybe there's a caste system, but it wasn't like the Black Lives Matter movement we're seeing now, because a lot of Indians culturally and ethnicity-wise the same. But there's definitely, he inspired me to really think about true equality and what it means for people. So he was my big inspiration. He's come to retirement age and we will miss him, GRUNDFOS. But he was really driving that from a GRUNDFOS standpoint. And there's lots of people like him outside the company. So it is happening that it isn't unique to find men trying to empower women, but I think there needs to be more of us now, and need to get our voices out there and stop being silent, because silence is almost being implicit in the problem. And I think one of the challenges of being a male is we're too scared to open our mouths and say the wrong thing nowadays. Even if we're well-intended and we have good intentions, it's so much easier to put your foot in your mouth, particularly if you're like me and you talk a lot.
Yeah,
so those are some of the barriers they have to overcome as males.
Yeah, so I think that is something interesting that we'll see how much time we have to go into that or not. But I want to say that just now, and how we are having a lot of open conversations with Black Lives Matter. You brought up, that opened our minds and our conversations to have difficult conversations. Be like, you know what, I'm going to mess up. I'm going to say the wrong thing here, and that's okay. And I think we, as men and women, need to do that again, right? That's a great example, leading that way. HJ, what about you? Do you know anybody that kind of inspired you to be an advocate, or that that is an advocate in the business?
So I thought about that quite a bit, Charlie, and to put a name on a person, I would say the late Jack Creamer with Schneider Electric was obviously a huge champion for your organization, but he was a champion for growth across the board, right? So he didn't care if it was black, white, women, old, young, new, been in the industry forever. He was an advocate for really helping people grow, helping people gain access to our industry, helping people to network. I mean, he was a competitor of ours, but he wasn't even competitor centric, right? He cared as much about us as he cared about his company and people in the industry. So I would say Jack.
Yeah, he's
but outside of Jack.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, you're going to make me cry here for a minute, but Jack he's definitely one of those that I would list as one of my biggest advocates and leaders in our organizations or our industry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, outside of Jack, when I look across leadership in general, I see a lot of men who really truly embrace diversity as an opportunity for growth, right? As a competitive advantage. And when I'm talking about diversity, I think about that, trying to have that, women in industry is a hot topic, right? There's women in engineering, there's women in service. Women in industry is a pretty hot topic. And I think there's a lot of organizations that feel like it's important to get a number they can put on a report or have a certain diversity in their organization because it's the right thing to do. But that's all lip service, right? I think you can meet people who truly see diversity as an opportunity for competitive advantage, for attracting a talent pool, for helping people grow. And I think that it's really important to search out and think about those leaders that are just open to the topic, right? I think that, and you and I have some experience here. I think it's important for people who are in the position to have a voice to say something. And when you watch for those candidates that are saying something, are trying to make a difference and really believe that diversity is an advantage for their organization, and it's also an advantage for people who are trying to grow in their careers. And they see it as an enabler. There's so many people that I thought about a lot of names. I could name a lot of people, but really it comes down to really great leaders, right? Who are really open to change.
Yeah, and you pointed out something that, it's hard for the woman to, and I'll just use me as that example, to come into a spot that's not very diverse, or, any minority group, to come to the table and say, like, you need to pay attention to this and improve this. That's harder than, say, someone in leadership or power that can make real shifts. I was listening to a podcast of the Harvard Business Review. Mel actually got me hooked on that one. And there's a episode about this very topic, about how men can be advocates. And one of the things, that stands out is really having men change the policies and change the way people are hired and things like that, like the actual steps in the system to make that change. Mel, do you got any thoughts here on good male advocates that you've seen? What is a good male advocate?
Oh gosh, there's so many things that I think can go into being a good advocate, and I think that there's a combination of listening and also speaking up, as you were just describing in some situations where it might not be comfortable for the woman in the room or a minority person to do so. So, when I think about men in my life who have been good advocates, they're doing things that are not public. They're doing things that are not, they're not getting a pat on the back from it. They're getting my gratitude, but they're doing things behind the scenes to help me become a better professional, because diversity, equity, and inclusion is a lot more than just hiring a diverse, set of people. It's more than just correcting some of the pipeline issues that we see in spaces like engineering or heavy industry. It's ensuring that the playing field gets leveled for all types of people, because the fact is that we can't really have a conversation about this without people, white people, particularly white men, acknowledging that they have had a substantial amount of privilege to get to the spaces that they are today. And so for those of us who have any type of privilege, we have a responsibility to, yes, acknowledge it, but also to use it to help advance others. So, I'll see if I can articulate this. So I worked with a man named Nick at the previous company that I was at. And the way that I would say he advocated for me is he ensured that I had the opportunity to be at the table and learn in high level business situations. So he took that a step further. Not only did he bring me into those meetings, but he would have one-on-one conversations with me afterwards to explain in detail, you know, did you pick up on this? Here's what you need to understand about the financials. Here's what you need to think about when you're wanting to build and maintain a long-term business relationship with a client. All of those types of things, I think they can happen naturally or ad hoc between men in, you know, what we see in our industry is those situations that still happen today, the golf outings, the late night bar discussions and whatnot, where those things happen naturally. What Nick did is he took the time to consciously make sure that he was teaching me and other not candidates, but employees and colleagues of all types, those important business acumen things that you've got to know if you're going to successfully climb the ladder. I think that we can all recognize, and I'll stop on this, that none of us got here to this point solely on our own, solely by pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. We've all had, you know, substantial help along the way, and we need to recognize that and pay it forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You know, David, I hadn't heard from you in a while, and I'm curious because it is, you know, I think the higher level we go, we do have to have that financial sense and that business sense of a company. And how do you get that if you're not in the room? How do you get experience? Same for field work in engineering, right? How do you get that experience if you're not at the table or without somebody bringing you in? So what can somebody do to bring people to the table if they're not at that level yet? What does that look like?
So some best practice I've seen, and it's not just in terms of female diversity, but it's general diversity as well. Some of the best leaders in my company and others, we're having monthly lunches with people from all over the company, all walks of life, and basically getting them in the room. It's not a leadership meeting, but just getting in a room. So our CEO, Mads Nipper, every single month has a meeting with people from all over the business, and just get and talk about how are you doing, what are you doing in your career, where would you like to go. So, and that's not just that's only also inspired other people to do the same leadership position. So having these meetings and actually doing it just for females in GRUNDFOS US, where it's facilitated by two or three females, but we're bringing in males as well, and we're having conversations. And let's say put the elephant on the table. We're having conversations about diversity, being open about it. And we're asking the men, so how are you going to help us? What are you going to do? What can you do? And I really like the example that Mel gave, because Nick sounds like someone who is definitely a role model that most of us would love to emulate. Now, where we are on that journey is debatable. I'm sure Nick sounds much further along than I, but that's where I'm aiming for. I think that's where a lot of us are aiming for. We're aiming to role model. And we're aiming to role model not just for females, but also for other males to say, I want to be a little bit more like David, because I certainly sound like I want to be a bit more like Nick as well. So it just accepts your vulnerability a little bit more, accept that you don't have all the answers. One of the things that I've always said, I get tough questions all the time about diversity. Instead of filling that with void and trying to give a, crappy answer, to be honest, I'm just okay to say, you know what, I'm going to really learn myself and find out how I really feel about that, or what really is it, because we're too cliched at the moment. We're trying to give the answer that we think people want to hear, as opposed to really process it and go, what do I really think about that? Because I think that would take the conversation further down the line than just doing sound bites, personally.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Go ahead, AJ.
Yeah, to contribute a couple of thoughts as well. I think we really need to think about those leaders, and as leaders ourselves, and really working with leaders that are really thinking about the future, right? And what that is, they're not thinking about delivering the next month or the next quarter necessarily and trying to get there, because, Mel had mentioned sort of the old boys network or whatever, and that was that group of guys that got together and, they had cocktails every month and celebrated the fact that we made it another month. not necessarily those people that were really thinking about what does the future look like. And, you know, we talked a lot about recruiting and attracting and hiring talent on the call and what that really looks like. But if we don't have a really diverse talent pool, both for opportunities as well as to help us think about the way we're looking at our business, how can we possibly have the best talent? I mean, how can it be the best talent if, like I said at the beginning of our discussion, if the candidates all look like me, right? I'm going to have more groupthink. It's going to be us, and it's going to be the old boys network going on, right? So if we really want to have the best talent in our organization for a competitive advantage, then we have to have an extremely diverse group of talent that has a different background, a different experience, a different education, a different way that they would look at life, to give us that super broad perspective to move the organization into the future, right? Otherwise, if we don't have that diverse group of talent, we look vanilla, you know. And being diverse in thought and in skill and in experience is an incredible advantage. Well, the only way we're going to get there is if we really look for that diverse group of people.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about, you know, when I hear you talk, HJ, because you are in leadership, I can hear you building your team and who you know that should be there. And then the other side of that is kind of personal and what we do that's maybe not tied to work. And I find that's easier to do any type of kind of charity, community work when it is tied to work that aligns with that. We've talked a little bit about what we can do. One of the things, you know, that we've done is created the podcast and the events for women to come together. And I'm so thankful that, you know, you guys are here to help us understand, you know, how we can be advocates and share to other men how they can be advocates. And I think that conversation between men and women has to happen, and that's where I feel like I grow and learn so much when I actually have a real conversation, right? I've talked about me and HJ sitting down and having a real conversation. Sometimes, you know, I may not say it the right way. I may be super frustrated, which you know he's definitely seen that, and then he's like, but this is how you should go about it to do it in a this is going to be more effective, right? So let's think about how we can make an impact. I know that's one of the things I wanted to ask you is, you know, what do you think we can actually do to make an impact in this area? I'm going to throw this at you, Mel, to start. Is it just having those conversations, just learning from our closest peer enough, or what do you say that we need to do to make an impact?
No, learning from your closest peer is not enough. So I think that there's so many different ways we could take this discussion. A couple of things that I'd like to highlight are, it takes effort to recognize your own unconscious biases and to help others do the same. And there are so many resources now that you can access to help yourself, help your colleagues and your company to do that. Just one example, there's an organization called Step Up Equity Matters, and they have like a online challenge your unconscious bias series that you can go through that is like emailed challenges to you. That type of thing is a really great place to start to begin to open that type of awareness. And then I also want to come back to listening. So I've encountered people, men and women, who seem to think that a lot of problems are behind us when it comes to gender inequity. And that's just not the case. There are, you know, just in my own short career, I can identify multiple instances that range from overt sexism to unconscious bias in the workplace that detrimentally impacted a woman's career. Mm-hmm. This stuff has not gone away, and it takes engagement from people at all levels to begin to correct those things. So another thing that I want to highlight is this concept of speaking up. So I'm going to describe a situation that happened in our industry, the water and wastewater industry, that I struggle to like not think about it because of how long this industry has been around. So many of us are involved with the organization Water Environment Federation, which is a great organization that's been around for over 100 years. And they have an annual conference in North America that garners over 20,000 people per year, usually, pandemic notwithstanding. And back in 2016, so not that long ago, someone stopped me at the conference and said, "Hey, did you see the booth, babe?" And I said, "No, I haven't. Why don't you show me?" And so they took me to this booth where an equipment company felt that it was appropriate to hire a model to stand in a bathing suit to try to attract passersby. And so I posted that to Twitter and asked the industry at large, like, is this what we want for our profession? Is this what you think is acceptable for water and wastewater professionals to be promoting? And it led to a change. There were people who chimed in about that, and the organization responded and they made the changes. And so that's not going to happen again in the future. And what I think about that is, why me? I was a junior engineer at that time. There are tens of thousands of professionals who passed through those conferences before me, and no man thought to raise his hand and say to the organization, you know, I think we shouldn't do that. So it took me publicly shaming that on social media to get the change to happen. And kudos to the organization for responding. I feel like they did a really wonderful job and responded the way that they should. But, you know, we're talking about industry. We're talking about heavy industry. I know that this garbage is still happening at plenty of other conferences, you know, oil and gas industry. I see you. So, like, who's going to say something?
I gotta say, this is how I met Mel. I saw this happen, and I said, I saw that girl, and I thought, I don't even want to go over there and do business with them, you know? And I said, okay, you know, that's how I was responding. And when I saw that she made that statement and that WEFTEC took action, I was like, I have to talk to her. And that is the start of our relationship because you spoke up. But to the point, why did it have to be a young professional coming in to you know, demand change?
Well, and I want to be clear that my personal take, my personal opinion is not that woman was doing anything wrong. I wholeheartedly support anyone who is working in the sex industry. They deserve the same protections as everyone else. But the problem is that when it is acceptable in a professional setting, like a conference that has over 20,000 people at it, for a company to use sexual exploitation to try to sell, that means that we have equity problems, gender equity problems that are still incredibly prevalent that need to be eradicated. Mm-hmm. So hopefully in my lifetime, you know, I'll see the day when it's okay for us to have, you know, men and women models at all the booths. Like, I hope we get to that point, but you know, we're really far from it right now.
Yeah.
I guess it's super inspiring to hear Mel there, and also kind of makes me feel embarrassed for not speaking up as well. So one of the things that you can do is go, yeah, if I see that again, I'm going to call it out next time, because I have seen that many times and I have not called it out. So therefore, that is shame on me for not doing it. So thank you, Mel. I want to have a bugbear with how we recruit in not just in our industry globally, but particularly in the US as well. Because one of the things I really see is not only even for I would say entry-level positions. I'm not talking admin positions. I'm talking entry-level in customer-facing positions. We expect people to have experience. You must have 5 years experience. Well, this is an entry-level position. Aren't you going to give people a try? Is another company giving them a try, and now you're going to steal them from that company? So the biggest concern I have is how we recruit in our industry, not just globally, but also in the US, in terms of entry-level positions and the number of years you have. And then second of all, do you really need a $100,000 college degree to start in our industry? Particularly, not only when you narrow it down to the STEM subjects, we then narrow it down to the E part of the STEM subjects, and then we narrow it down to the mechanical engineering part of the STEM subjects. Can we be a little bit more open-minded about the kind of people? Because when you narrow it down, of all of the STEM subjects that is least represented by females, when you narrow it down to the E and the M and all the way down, the percentage is really low from the talent pool. So I'm challenging my own company and hopefully using this as a voice. Can we be open-minded about the type of people? The example I spoke to you, Charlie, was, should we be interested in a $100,000 college graduate, or should we give a veteran a try that has been in a war zone and was a tank mechanic and never had any college education, knows how things work mechanically, has a really good personality, and knows how to get stuff done? I was going to say another S word, but knows how to get stuff done. I would rather have people like that, but they're never on the resumes I see. So therefore, I'm discounting thousands of candidates. So that's my bugbear and my plea to recruitment processes across all companies in our space. Be a bit more open-minded, because then I'll get resumes that truly are diverse and I can pick from a much bigger talent pool.
I think that to a certain degree, we need to challenge your audience, Charlie, right? So your audience has got a lot of women who are out there that want to have an impact made, right? And I really appreciated Mel's comment and story. I can recall a time seeing a mermaid in a booth, right? Well, it was a booth babe that happened to look like a mermaid, even a little bit more ridiculous maybe, right? But I think there's a lot of times that we really want to advocate for changing rules and really taking on the big institutions, right? Mel was strong enough to raise her voice in a big industry association and call out a manufacturer and saw real and almost immediate change. We spend a ton of our energy, I think, really trying to take on the big institutions and really make change in organizations. I sit on a board and I asked the question at the board meeting that we should just look around and say, we're talking about diversity here. I think we should really look at ourselves in the mirror, because guess what? We're not all that diverse, right? And to a degree, that's taken on the institution. But when I say that, which is great and needs to be done, but it's such a long and slow, painful process, right? And if people sit around and wait for change, right? Organizations that don't want to make a change, wait for laws to change that force them into change. There are other organizations that really want to make a change. So when I say I'd like to challenge your audience, I think that your audience really should look for great leaders, right? Look for leaders who appreciate diversity, are willing to speak, willing to listen, willing to challenge the existing paradigm, willing, as I said earlier, think about the future, right? Think about how their organization is going to have truly a competitive advantage by attracting that talent that really wants to make a difference, right? And so I would challenge your audience, to basically say, screw you, and not go work for these people who are stuck in their way, stuck on a path, aren't willing to listen, say, yeah, diversity is an important topic, but change will come one day. Or when they're out in their hiring practice and they say, well, we need to interview a woman, not I want to have a diverse talent pool and pool of candidates, right? I would challenge your audience, and it's not immediate, it's not urgent, right? But take the energy that they really have about having the opportunity to succeed and don't work for leaders who are stuck.
It's about how hard it is to have the energy to constantly be pushing against that organization or wall or company or whoever that has that complete opposite mindset that you do. And I think it's great advice. You know, those aren't the people we want to reach. That's not where you should spend your time and energy. It's such a great point, AJ. I think that when you know you're on point, these are good things and right things to work for, then you can have, the energy is there. It's the opposition to something that you know is right that really drains you. Personally, I've never, been happier than in a room full of like minds, and that's men and women both, who are looking to be leaders and drive change for the better. And so I'm really happy that you brought that up. I'm interested in hearing from David on that topic, as far as, energy and what it takes to make change on a more corporate side of life. What have you seen be really helpful? I know you talked about the groups earlier, but anything kind of bigger than that within an organization?
I really like what HJ put it. I've seen the fact that at the very top of our organization, because we're willing to have conversations, and our CEO has it's called Yammer, but it's the equivalent of a Facebook style page, where anyone in the company, at any level in the company, can ask the CEO really tough questions. And you can see how he reacts to that in a really open way and gives the person the credit in the space and the answer back. And that's really encouraged the rest of the leadership teams to, you're not getting away with sending silent. If someone asks you a question anywhere in the organization, you're going to step up and answer it. So I've been inspired by our own CEO that he's not been afraid, right down to the Black Lives Matter movement. He's posted his opinion, and he's got varying different opinions, and right to climate change. And there's lots of people in our organization, despite the fact that we do believe climate change as an organization, we have colleagues that aren't so convinced. He will engage in very open and public discussions, and it gives us all energy that we're not afraid now to be able to say our opinions. So I work for an organization where I feel safe to voice an opinion, and I believe that everyone in our company feels safe to voice an opinion, because you're going to get shot down. You may get into a debate and you may learn something, but you're not going to get shut down for having a different opinion. Of course, I do put a caveat that we don't tolerate hate speech, and we don't tolerate injustice. But when it comes to old-fashioned adult conversation, which I do think we're lacking in society nowadays, I actually like to have as many conversations with people that differ from my view as I do in my echo chamber of having people that agree with me all the time. Because I'll never move forward by having great conversations with you, Charlie, because you and I are like-minded. What I need to know is, can I engage with someone who has a differing opinion? So I think that that's what we've seen. Last but not least, made a plug for learning. I would also say educate yourself. Really drive into it. Do you have biases? I did a test on Project Implicit. I did a gender bias test towards careers. And even though I would have rated myself as not being biased, I'm slightly biased with the term career and male. What's also interesting is some of my female colleagues that are very focused on diversity, they also scored the same as me. They were biased with female and family and male and career. So, but now we're talking about it. So now I said, hey, I scored the same as you. What does that mean for me? So now we're having open conversations about biases that I would never have had those conversations 5 years ago. I would have been too scared to have them. But now I feel safe to do it.
Yeah, I had a conversation about this, and I think that, we are empowering women. I am a woman. I feel that the need to empower women, and I feel like I have something to say because I'm a woman. Like I can relate. But at the same time, I feel like I can give a lot of advice to men too. Like I've learned a lot. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been in this industry for over 15, 16, 17 years now. And you're like, I want to offer this to you. And so it's not about just empowering women, but if women are empowered, then you see all these other changes to our communities that will happen. And so it's similar to the story you gave earlier about women and girls having to go and get water because that's where they needed to be, and being able to not have to go get water and can be educated. I feel like that is sometimes where I am in that next step of, I want all of that information so I can be better, so I can grow and be forward, so I can help men and women, right? And all people and all cultures. So but for empowering women and where we are today. And I'm just super thankful for each of you sharing your perspective. We're going to have a great rest of the day, so stay with us.